Welcome to another Mallory Vance adventure. Get comfortable and let your mind set the stage as you enjoy the silent orchestra.
The biting wind howled through the canyons of downtown Chicago, slicing through the thick wool of my coat like a razor through parchment. The city's towering monoliths of steel and glass stood sentinel against the bruised purple twilight, their mirrored facades reflecting the flickering neon glow of late-night diners and the occasional passing taxi. My breath curled in the frigid air, ghostly plumes dissipating into the night as I stared up at the grand facade of Symphony Hall. Its ornate doors, carved with intricate musical motifs depicting scenes from Mozart's Requiem, loomed before me like the entrance to some sacred tomb, casting long skeletal shadows across the marble steps worn smooth by decades of polished shoes. Detective Mallory Vance, once again summoned to a scene where the ordinary laws of reality seemed to bend and twist into something far more sinister. The call had come in at precisely 11:47 p.m., just as the final patrons were leaving the evening's performance of Mahler's Fifth. Officer Chen's voice had been tight with something approaching professional unease, unusual for a 15-year veteran. "You need to see this, Van," he'd said. "It's not like anything we've handled before." Maestro Anton Volkov, the world-renowned conductor whose interpretations of Stravinsky had revolutionized modern orchestral performance, had been found dead in his private dressing room mere hours before what was to be a historic performance of his controversial new composition. His body was slumped over his prized baton, a gift from Karajan himself, his fingers still curled around its ebony handle, as if he had been mid-crescendo when death seized him. The coroner would later estimate the time of death between 8:30 and 9 p.m., right around when the orchestra should have been tuning for the second half of the program. But it wasn't the manner of his death that sent a ripple of unease through the precinct. It was the silence. A suffocating, unnatural silence that clung to the room like a shroud, so complete that Officer Chen reported his ears had actually ached from the absence of sound. Volkov, a man whose very existence had been a symphony of noise from his famously thunderous temper to the delicate way he could make a room hold its breath with the barest gesture of his hand, had died in absolute, deafening quiet. The dressing room was pristine, untouched by violence in any conventional sense. No signs of struggle, no forced entry, not even a single overturned chair or misplaced sheet of music. The only disturbance was the maestro himself, his usually vibrant face frozen in an expression of abject terror, his eyes wide and glassy as if he had seen something beyond comprehension in his final moments. His mouth was slightly open, not in a scream, but in what looked like wonder. The local detectives, hardened veterans of Chicago's most brutal crimes, exchanged uneasy glances at the scene. This wasn't a crime born of rage or greed. This was something else entirely. The Chicago Symphony Orchestra was a microcosm of towering egos and fragile artistry. Each musician a world-class virtuoso in their own right, each harboring their own grudges, ambitions, and secrets. Volkov had been a genius, but genius often walked hand in hand with cruelty. His rehearsals were legendary for their intensity, his criticisms delivered with the precision of a scalpel. More than one musician had left his presence in tears, their confidence shattered by a single, perfectly aimed remark about their phrasing or intonation. I began my interviews with the first violinist, Lillian Graves, a woman whose playing was said to make angels weep with envy. We met in the empty concert hall, the ghost lights casting long shadows across the vacant seats. Her hands trembled as she spoke. her fingers usually so sure and steady on the strings fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. He was relentless, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But he made us better, even when we hated him for it. She looked down at her hands, the calluses visible even in the dim light. Last week, he made me play the solo from Scheherazade 17 times in a row, 17, until my fingers bled. And then he said I'd finally understood. Then there was Daniel Hargrove, the principal cellist, a man whose talent was matched only by his arrogance. He received me in his lavish apartment overlooking Millennium Park, pouring 2 fingers of expensive scotch with hands that didn't shake at all. He leaned back in his leather chair, his lips curling into a smirk that didn't reach his cold, calculating eyes. Volkov was a tyrant, he said, swirling the amber liquid. But tyrants don't usually die quietly. Someone wanted to make a statement. He took a slow sip, or perhaps a demonstration. The stage manager, a grizzled old theater hand named Marty O'Reilly, provided the most curious detail. "Strange thing," he said, chewing on an unlit cigar. "The mics were acting up all night. Feedback where there shouldn't be none. Channels cutting in and out. And the weirdest part? The acoustics in the hall, they were off. Like the room itself was resisting the music." But one name kept resurfacing, whispered in hushed tones backstage like a forbidden chord. Dr. Evelyn Richter. Dr. Richter was an enigma, a brilliant but reclusive acoustician who had been working closely with Volkov on a project shrouded in secrecy. Her laboratory, hidden deep beneath the symphony hall in what had once been a Prohibition-era speakeasy, was a temple to sound. The moment I stepped inside, the air itself seemed to vibrate with an unseen energy, pressing against my eardrums in a way that made me want to swallow constantly. The walls were lined with intricate sound-dampening panels, their surfaces etched with complex geometric patterns that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. A low, resonant hum pulsed through the room, emanating from a bank of sleek audio equipment that glowed with an eerie blue light. And then there was the music box. It sat alone on a pedestal in the center of the room, an exquisite antique piece of craftsmanship. Its polished rosewood inlaid with mother-of-pearl and swirling patterns that reminded me of sound waves. The melody it played was hauntingly familiar, though I couldn't quite place it, something between a lullaby and a requiem. Dr. Richter emerged from the shadows, her presence commanding despite her slight frame. She moved with the precision of a metronome, every step deliberate. Her eyes, a piercing shade of gray that seemed to see right through me, held an intensity that bordered on unsettling. "Detective Vance," she said, her voice measured, as if every syllable had been carefully calibrated for optimal resonance. "I suppose you're here about the silence." She explained Volkov's final obsession, infrasound. Frequencies below the threshold of human hearing, typically between 1 to 20 hertz, capable of inducing visceral reactions from unease to outright terror. At 7 hertz, she said, running a finger along the edge of the music box, you can induce cardiac arrhythmia. At 17 hertz, visual hallucinations. The ancients believed certain caves were haunted because of natural infrasonic resonance. She looked up, her gaze sharp. Volkov called it the Silent Orchestra, a composition of pure infrasound, a symphony that could manipulate emotions without a single audible note. But someone else had taken an interest in his research. They called themselves the Discord, a shadowy collective of rogue sound engineers, black market acousticians, and sonic weapon specialists who believed sound should be liberated from artistic constraints and used as pure force. They had infiltrated the symphony months ago, sabotaging equipment, altering recordings, all in pursuit of one goal: to weaponize Volkov's research. They didn't just kill him, Richter said, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried perfectly in the acoustically tuned room. They silenced him, made his death a testament to their power, the ultimate performance art. The main control room was the beating heart of the symphony's sound system, a labyrinth of wires, switches, and humming servers tucked away behind the stage. It was here that the Discord had planted their weapon, a modified subwoofer array capable of emitting a concentrated burst of infrasound at 19 hertz, the frequency known to induce terror and even temporary paralysis. I wasn't a sound engineer, but I understood fear, and I understood that every weapon had a counter-frequency. The music box. Richter had explained that its unique construction produced harmonic overtones that could disrupt infrasonic waves. When I activated it through the symphony's speaker system, the air itself seemed to shudder. The masked figures, their faces obscured by specialized sound-dampening helmets, recoiled as if struck. One clutched at his head, screaming soundlessly as the vibrations disrupted their carefully calibrated equipment. The silence shattered like glass, replaced by the delicate, crystalline notes of the music box, a lullaby against the storm. 2 weeks later, the symphony hall was alive once more with music. The musicians, though shaken, had returned to their instruments. The show, as they say, must go on. Lillian Graves performed the solo from Scheherazade with tears streaming down her face, but her hands never wavered. I stood outside in the cold Chicago night, the wind biting at my cheeks, the distant hum of the city a symphony in its own right. The silent orchestra had been silenced, its discordant notes erased. But as I turned up my collar against the wind, I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, in some hidden corner of the world, the Discord was already tuning their instruments for another performance. And I, Detective Mallory Vance, would be listening, always listening. Because in this city, the music never really stops, it just changes keys. And the most dangerous notes are the ones you can't hear.
You have been enjoying The Silent Orchestra, a Mallory Vance adventure. Join us for other Mallory Vance stories available where you found this one. Until next time.